Alright, so it's confession time. I am a little bit obsessed with the Data East arcade game Windjammers. And, I mean, how could I not be? Are you seeing these neon colors? What is essentially Pong with an early 90s cocaine paint job has stayed in heavy rotation in my own arcade cabinet, and everyone I've personally introduced it to has agreed the gameplay, style, and fun on offer here is bordering on gaming perfection. So you would figure I'd be equally as stoked for the release of High Horse Entertainment's answer to that age-old question, why the shit hasn't anyone made a new Windjammers game? And I am, well, sort of. Look, it's complicated. So before we get into that, let's take a look at what this tiny two-man development house was trying to recreate. And as a proactive warning, I'm about to get ridiculously deep and analytical about a mid-90s Frisbee game. So let's go ahead and mull over the poor decisions that have collectively brought us to this point. In Windjammers, you play as one of 6 multicultural jammers of wind and choose between just as many courts to jam some wind on. Each character has a different walking speed, throw strength, and super throw. A lot of these attributes only come into play during high-skill matches, but the simple act of having a cast of characters that are easy enough to play on the surface, but have enough depth to support deeper mechanics is well worth praising. Now, once you've chosen an arena to play future Frisbee in, you'll find there's a lot to take in. Not only is each court different in layout, but they offer different hindrances too. For example, you might come across a very narrow beach arena, or the dreaded concrete course with its disc-bouncing fences in the middle. And before I turn you off with all these intricacies, let's talk about how easy the game can be to pick up and play. Being an obscure arcade release by a company that no longer exists, my first experience with this game is likely to mirror your own. I just picked up a controller and went to town. Which leads to another plus, the fact that new players are likely to figure out 90% of what's on offer here in the first match they play. And this is all thanks to Windjammers using a whopping 2 buttons to play the game. And yeah, you did hear me right, one of the best competitive experiences I've ever had was with a 2-button game. There's one button that pulls double duty as both dash and throw, and then you've got your volley button, which throws the disc in the air, giving your opponent a small window to get under it before it hits the ground. And that's just about everything you need to know in order to have a blast with this gem. Of course, there are deeper mechanics, so let's dive in. Instead of choosing one of the 8 directions to throw your disc, you can also perform half or quarter circles to curve your throw and alter its behavior. Then there's your super throws, and man, do these spice things up. If you're able to hit the throw button just before the disc hits your hands, you can deflect it up into the air. And if you can position yourself directly under it, your character will charge up a super throw. These throws are specific to each character, and they really add a layer of franticness to a match. If you aren't supremely familiar with the type of super coming your way, defending your goal comes down to luck. And even if you know every super in the game, they can still be altered by direction presses after they've been thrown. And even underneath all that, there are slight modifiers and quirks to be learned still. All of this boils down into 2 distinct possibilities. Either Windjammers is the shallowest deep game you've ever played, or the deepest shallow game. And now that we've familiarized ourselves with the legendary Windjammers, let's see how its unofficial spiritual successor fares. Booting up Disc Jam, we are immediately knocked down a point, and even though this isn't related to the comparison between it and Windjammers, I really wanted to mention that the menu here is very unintuitive and kind of bare bones. But we're not going to harp on about menu design, so let's jump into the game proper. Right off the bat, we have a diminished cast of characters, and if we're being honest, this isn't really grounds for deduction. As long as the characters are varied and interesting, I have no complaints, and luckily that's exactly what we're working with here. After choosing a character and customizing him or her to a really cool degree, we can finally select our arena, or at least we would if there were more than one option, which there isn't. This is a huge step back, as the different courts in Windjammers definitely went a long way in keeping things from feeling stagnant, although admittedly the lack of choosable courts is the least of our problems here. As you've undoubtedly noticed, Disc Jam has a radically different point of view from Windjammers. Ditching the slightly angled top-down view, we now have a slightly angled third-person camera. This isn't exactly hard to get used to, but it presents a lot of problems later on. This new view introduces a lot of variables that don't exactly mesh with the type of gameplay they're trying to pull off here. This behind-the-goal perspective means that you have a great view of everything above your goal's own halfway point, but either due to some kind of poor depth perception on my part, or the flaws inherent to this kind of viewpoint, I found that I had problems determining the course of the disc once it crossed over the halfway point. Now, maybe this is a personal issue, but after a decade of playing competitive Windjammers, I'd like to think that I can identify angles fairly well. Another downside to this camera angle is local multiplayer sessions needing to adopt a split screen. Now obviously this isn't the worst thing in the world, but it feels like a missed opportunity since most of my matches are against people in the same room as me. One thing that might go unnoticed in a quick game of Windjammers is how perfectly the game's mechanics were tuned to the arenas they took place in. Proportions play a crazy big role in competitive skill-based games, and I feel like this is one aspect that may have given High Horse some trouble. The one court on offer here is way too big for the kind of game being played in it, and this makes it far too easy to bait a person on one side of the screen, only to make a play for the opposite. Now this was an existing metagame in Windjammers, but everything from court size to sprite dimensions and run speed gave a player on the receiving end of this tactic a fair chance at turning the tables. Another idea that hit the cutting room floor was positions of the goal having different point rewards. Instead of aiming for that coveted 5-point section, Disc Jam players see the possible point reward increase with successful back and forth play. Now on the surface, I actually like this system because it raises the stakes and really gets your blood pumping. But because there's no limit to how high the points can go, it's entirely possible to play a great game of Disc Jam but lose an entire match after your opponent scores just one goal. I think this system will be great, but some tweaking is definitely needed. Ask any Windjammer what they love about the game and you're likely to hear about the kick-ass special throws, and sadly this is another area where Disc Jam stumbles. Windjammers had a pretty easy system for specials. Just hit throw slightly before the disc hits you and stay under it until a super gets charged up. Disc Jam has a similar system but allows the throw to be charged by holding the throw button and getting in front of the disc. Right off the bat, I'll say that the fast nature of your typical match simply doesn't allow this to happen a lot. Since charging throws reduces your run speed, it's generally a bad idea, and an incomplete charge will knock the disc away, giving your opponent a couple of free points. In a typical 30-minute session, you might see 3 or 4 special throws maybe, and that really sucks. Now, since I've been pissing and moaning about the flaws in Disc Jam, it's only fair that I talk about the things that it actually gets right. The addition of online play is not only well implemented, but really damn fun. I'm not sure what type of netcode is being used here, but my online matches are perfectly smooth about 95% of the time. And piggybacking off of this is the addition of a 2 vs 2 mode. This doubles game really changes up the mechanics of matches and sort of explains why the court is so big. So after all these complaints, I guess the real question is, do I like Disc Jam? And despite everything I've said in this video, yeah, it's really fun. The online is killer, and overall it's great for couch competitions. I just feel the tight, well thought out gameplay found in Windjammers may have been a little harder to emulate than both me and High Horse Games thought. To make a long story short,
you're a bit late for that!
Disc Jam is totally worth the $15 it'll run you on Steam and PSN, but don't expect it to replace your beloved Windjammers. And now that I've made a complete fool of myself by whining about an old arcade game,
I'm gonna go home and sleep with my wife.
Hey guys, thanks for sitting through this, insanity. If you want some videos very much not like this one, check out the links on the screen. And if you like what I'm doing here, maybe stop by my Patreon page and toss a little support my way. If you can't do that, that's fine. A quick like and maybe a subscribe, we'll call it even.